What's up everybody, welcome to the Malifaux Lore Guide. If you're new here, in this series, we pick out a master from Malifaux and go through their entire backstory, covering all of their lore. And this week, we're covering Cornelius Basse, of the Guild and the Explorer Society. So spoiler alert for all of his stories, and you can find a list of the stories in the description below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to help support me and get this video out to more people. And with that finished, let's get on to Basse. Cornelius Basse grew up on a farm in the Midwest, where he learned patience and responsibility, as well as how to handle a shotgun. When his father died, he decided that farming wasn't for him, and he started traveling the frontier, where he interacted with vagrants and bandits. Soon he met the love of his life, and she gave him a daughter, Bernadette, but then died soon after. As he continued to travel, he gained a reputation throughout the West as the face of frontier justice, as his sense of justice and fairness often found him breaking up fights, and eventually he became a sheriff. He hoped that he was setting a good example for his daughter, and he taught her the importance of self-defense and survival skills. But those very lessons came back to haunt them when Bernadette witnessed a boy being picked on, and tried to intervene, which led to a fight, and while defending herself, she stabbed and killed the aggressor. He turned out to be the son of a corrupt judge, and Basse knew that if they were to stay in the United States, that his daughter would be hanged. He decided to abandon the justice system he always stood for, and he took his daughter and left for Malifaux. Cornelius and Bernadette get ushered into a guild office, their hands bound in handcuffs. Bernadette looks like she's getting ready to fight, but Basse gives her a look to try to calm her down. Dashiell Barker walks in and dismisses the guards before removing the handcuffs from the Basses. Dashiell introduces himself, but already knows who they are, and refers to Basse as sheriff. Basse responds that he's not a sheriff anymore, and Bernadette asks why they were arrested. Dashiell responds that knowing their history, he could have done a lot worse, but in reality he just sent the guards to escort them to the guild enclave, and they were only arrested because they attacked the guards. Bernadette bares her teeth, and Dashiell asks Basse if he thinks he can behave on this side of the breach, because he might have some work for the man. Basse responds that he isn't interested in guild work, and that they're just there as civilians. But Dashiell replies that that's not an option, and that he needs someone like Basse who understands what is needed for order. Basse corrects him that he simply understands the value of law, and Dashiell shoots back that order is what he needs, and what is needed in the contract towns. He starts rummaging through some files, clearly not used to working behind a desk, and Basse asks why Dashiell doesn't go impose order himself. Dashiell responds that he does, but he spends more time behind a desk nowadays, and then he finally finds what he was looking for, and hands 2 pieces of paper to the man. Bernadette looks over and sees that her father is holding 2 pardons with each of their names on them. Dashiell explains that they're only good after a few years of service to the guild, and Basse asks if the other option is to be extradited back to the United States right away. Dashiell confirms, and goes on to explain that he wouldn't be able to guarantee their safety on the way back to the train station, never mind back Earthside. He hands Basse another file, and it contains detailed information on himself and his daughter, and he is surprised at how much power and influence the guild seem to have outside their territory. Dashiell hands them a map with several contract towns circled on it, and explains that those are the towns they'll be visiting, and that they are to meet with Paul Crockett, who will be their guide, as well as a man named Jonathan Reichert. When asked, Dashiell explains that Reichert used to be a guild executioner who retired early and still owes some service to the guild. The next morning, they meet Reichert in front of the guild HQ, and the man introduces himself, explaining that he doesn't like guild lackeys. Bernadette makes a witty comment, and things get tense between the two, but Basse calms them down and explains that they have no love for the guild either. Reichert speculates that the guild must have something on them, and Basse replies that they have something he wants, but that they intend to do things their own way, and are going to try to do some good in the contract towns. They make their way to the edge of the city, and knock on the door of a shack, and a smelly man dressed in animal pelts answers the door. They explain that they were sent by Dashiell, and Crockett collects his 2 axes and puts a dead raccoon on his head. Bernadette comments that she likes his hat, and Crockett points to it and says that's Ralphie. Basse shows him their map, and they decide to head to the town of Redemption first, so they board a train to Ridley and then take a carriage into the wilderness. After a while, Crockett demands that they stop, and he moves to the side of the road where he finds a smear of blood on a tree, and then finds a severed arm in the bushes. Basse asks how much further they need to go, and Crockett explains that it's only a few hours on foot, so they send the driver back to the town and continue walking. As the sun goes down, the very hot day starts to turn quite cold, and by the time they reach the outskirts of Redemption, there's snow on the ground. When they enter the town, they find it abandoned, and Bernadette makes her way to one of the buildings and knocks, but no one responds. Just as they're agreeing to settle in for the night, they see some movement, and Bernadette investigates, only to find an ice gamin holding a severed human torso. It shoots cold breath at her, and she defends, and then hits it with her chain, and swipes her knife at it as it scratches at her with its claws. Basse tries to get a shot, but can't fire without risking hitting his daughter, and as the melee continues, Reichert jumps in and shatters the creature with his metal claws. Later, once they've set up camp, Crockett reports back that he found a set of footprints leaving the town, and something must have fled when the fighting started. He asks what it is that they're up against, and Crockett tells him that it's cannibals, to which Reichert agrees. Bernadette asks if that's what happened to everyone in town, and Crockett nods, and Basse asks if some of them may still be alive, and the guide confirms again. Basse turns to his daughter, looking at her bandaged wounds from the encounter with the Gaiman, and asks how she's doing. She says she's fine, but then pauses, and responds that she's not fine, and they need to go save those people. They set out the next morning, and Basse explains to the group that they are not to kill anyone, but their targets are to be taken alive. The entire group dissents, but Basse insists, explaining that they're here for justice, not revenge. As Cornelius and Bernadette have a conversation about the boy she killed that brought them to this place, and whether it was the right thing for her to do in the circumstances, they're suddenly pulled away by the sound of explosions. Harpoons shoot past them, and they see cloaked figures in the trees moving towards them. Basse calls out and asks them to surrender, and tries again even when they only respond with more harpoon shots. He reminds the group to take them alive, and begins fighting off the cultists with his fists. Bernadette engages with her chains, and Reichert enters the melee as well, but Paul Crockett draws his axes. He uses them cautiously at first, but then one of the cultists slashes his arm with its knife, and he goes into a rage, swinging the axes wildly until he cuts down his target. After Basse knocks the last few assailants unconscious, he approaches Crockett and finds his daughter has restrained him with her chains. He tries to talk some sense into the man, but Crockett just snaps at him with an animalish look on his face, and they all agree that he's given into a berserker rage. Bernadette punches him, and he turns to face her, so she follows up with another 2 punches and knocks him out cold. When he comes to, Basse asks him if he's still with them, or if he's gonna attack them again, and he responds by asking if they intend to attack him. They agree that he's better now, and give him back his axes, before discussing how much further they have to go. Crockett explains that if they leave their captives here, they might be dead by the time they make it back, and Basse replies that the townspeople take priority, even if the cultists have to die. Reichert warns him that Malifaux has a way of changing people, and usually not for the better. As they continue pursuing the cultists, Crockett locates several traps, and helps the group avoid them, before they find a young girl trapped in a cage. They let her out, and she tells them that there's 15 cultists, but she's not sure how many townspeople are left. They sneak into a small settlement where they see groups of cultists feasting on human flesh and performing weird rituals. They locate a cage full of townspeople and let them go before going deeper into the settlement. They find another cage and Crockett approaches it, but as he tries to open it, it collapses as a creature jumps on top of it, crushing the cage and the people inside. The Blessed of December charges at them as one of the cultists comes up from behind and attacks Basse. He tries to give her a chance to surrender again, but as more cultists approach and engage the party, Basse realizes they're badly outnumbered. Seeing how desperate the situation is, he draws his shotgun and starts opening fire. Each of them begin cutting down the cultists, but they still continue to come, and the Blessed of December charges Basse and bites him on the arm. He buries his knife into its eye, giving him a moment of reprieve when he notices one of the acolytes approaching, pushing a young girl along. Basse recognizes her as the first girl they rescued, and he demands that the acolyte let her go. She responds by scolding Basse for letting their meat go, and he tries to line up a shot, but once again realizes that he can't fire without risking hitting the girl. At that moment, Crockett walks up behind the acolyte and buries his axe in the back of her head. The girl tries to get away, but suddenly the Blessed charges at her, and Basse fires at it with his shotgun. The creature seems unfazed, and it seizes the girl and crushes her body in its large claws. They see something resembling a grin on its face as it flees into the forest before they have a chance to pursue. Bernadette insists that they go after it, but Reichert responds that they have to get out of here, as they almost didn't make it. The group heads back to the town, where the surviving townspeople offer them shelter in a bar, as well as some beer and medical attention. Bernadette pulls out the map and draws an X over the town of Redemption, explaining that it means that they failed because they lost too many people here. Basse agrees and says that there'll be no more X's and no more failures. Reichert points out the nearest contract town on the map, and Crockett chimes in that there are plenty more towns to visit. Basse, Bernadette, and Reichert are sitting around a camp, and Reichert is warning him to be careful around his new associates. Bernadette teases him for being scared, and Reichert responds that he has learned that paper pushers can be more dangerous than gunslingers. Basse tells him to simply watch over the people of the local town for a few weeks until Basse comes back. Basse and Bernadette make their way across the Badlands, south of the Hollow Point pumping station, and he reviews the letter from von Clausewitz of the Explorer Society, thanking him for accepting this job, and telling him that he will be rewarded accordingly. It also gives a piece of advice not to stare. As Basse looks up, he sees their new companions, and Bernadette immediately comments that they must be necromancers, and her father tells her not to judge until they've had a chance to meet. When they approach, there's an awkward silence before Jedza introduces herself, as well as Mikhail and Sophie. Basse tells them that they'll rest here for the night and set out in the morning. He invites them to his campfire, and then asks Jedza about the mission. She explains that it'll only take a few days, and that Gretchen from the Explorer Society only wanted them to come along because they are living and trustworthy. With that, Bernadette asks her if she's a necromancer, and Jedza replies replies that she's not, but that there's some places that she can't go in her condition. Bernadette is still confused, but Jezza tells her that she'll understand in time. Mikhail suggests that they eat, and he excitedly prepares a soup, while Basse offers up some bread and cheese. Bernadette offers to take Jezza's sack, but Mikhail laughs and tells her that he doubts the three of them could lift it together. At Bernadette's curiosity, Jezza starts going through the sack, producing a plethora of random items and trinkets. They all eat, and then Jezza tells stories of the adventures she's been on as they drift off to sleep. They set out in the morning, and Bernadette asks Mikhail if he is alive. He tells her that he is, but that they are too in a way, and Bernadette inquires as to how he got involved with Jezza. Mikhail explains that long ago a promise was made, and that there is always a Mikhail in his family who accompanies Jezza. Bernadette asks how old she is, and he explains that she was already old when she saved his people, and that was centuries ago. They walk until they come to a train yard, and a representative from Condor Rails greets them and leads them to a luxury train. Jezza and Mikhail seem right at home, but Bernadette is excited and impressed at the opulence. Mikhail pours a glass of spirits for him and Basse, and the sheriff starts to think that it may not be so bad working for the Explorer Society. They spend a day on the train eating and drinking before it stops and they get out. They find themselves at the foot of a dirigible, and Basse starts to get nervous. Mikhail teases Basse as they get aboard, and Jezza asks Bernadette if she is also afraid of heights. She confidently says no, but loses some of her gusto as the ship shakes as it begins to take off. After a short ride, they find themselves in the mountains, and Jezza tells the pilots of the dirigible to wait for them. They make their way down a rocky path until they find the opening of an old mine. Jezza takes a roll off of Sophie's back and lays it out on the floor, and the creature steps on top of it. Basse asks Mikhail what that's all about as Jezza walks into the mine. Mikhail tells him to watch. As they follow behind Jezza, they look back to see the creature collapse into a pile of bones. As they make their way deeper inside the mine, the tunnels get narrower, and Basse finds himself uncomfortable not being under the open sky. They pass the skeletal remains of a human, and when Jezza gets close, the bones start moving, as if the body was reanimating. Bernadette is startled, and Jezza tells her that it's going to be fine. As she walks away, the bones settle back down. Jezza explains that this place is where lost things go to be forgotten, and that they are to touch nothing, and shouldn't trust their eyes or ears. Basse starts to see shadows moving, and hear voices, but he focuses on following Jezza as she asked. They come upon the remains of a human-like creature, and Jezza hands Bernadette a magical thread and tells her to place it across the creature's back. Basse readies his shotgun, and Bernadette follows the instructions as the creature starts to move. The soul stones in its eye sockets start to glow, and it tries to crawl away, but the thread holds it in place. Jezza tries to calm the creature and tells it that she is not one of their servants, and it seems to calm down and asks her what she wants. She tells the creature that she has the first piece of the machine, but she wants information on where she can find the rest. It tells her that it wants something of equal value in return, and it senses that she has something from the tyrants with her. She produces a crystal lens and places it on the floor, and it seems pleased, telling her the information she wants in a cryptic riddle, save for the final piece, which it claims to have in its own possession. Jezza tells it that she wants that piece, and then gets closer to it and whispers another question. It grins and says it can answer, but this time it wants the girl as the price. Basse cocks his shotgun and starts to doubt this new alliance he has formed, and Mikhail readies his sword. Basse considers whether the swordsman would survive a shotgun blast, but Jezza calls out to calm them down, and tells Mikhail to lower his sword. She turns back to the creature and says that the girl is not part of the deal, and that she alone will pay the price. It tells her it wants the thing that is most valuable to her, and she removes a chain from around her neck with 2 rings attached. She hesitates briefly, but then places it on the ground. Basse only hears murmurs as the creature answers Jezza's question and produces a small orb, handing it to her. Then it touches her on the forehead, and she turns to leave. When she does, the creature collapses. Basse and Bernadette follow, and as they're making their way out of the mine, he suddenly hears a crash and readies his gun. He calms down as he realizes that Bernadette had simply tripped over a mirror and almost fallen. Jezza turns and scolds her, reminding her not to touch anything, and Bernadette is embarrassed but walks it off. As they leave, no one notices a form ripple across the surface of the mirror. They get outside and collect Sophie, and then head back to the airship. Jezza hands the orb and a handwritten note to Basse and tells him to bring it back to the Explorer Society. When he takes the orb, she tells him not to touch it for too long, and then puts it in a small bag for him. Bernadette tells Jezza that she's sorry that the woman had to give up her rings, and Jezza responds that they weren't as valuable as a life. Bernadette and Basse get on the airship, while Jezza, Mikhail, and Sophie stay behind. Basse returns to the Explorer Society mansion and meets with von Clausewitz. He gives the man the orb and the note, and von Clausewitz reads the note and then smiles. He congratulates Basse on successfully completing the mission, and then explains that while he knows that Basse works for the Guild, the Explorer Society pulled some strings with the Governor General himself, and would like to offer him a job as well as a permanent position within the Explorer Society. Basse looks down at the table at a signet ring with the Explorer Society logo on it, and then asks what's the job. So that's it for Basse. He's pretty interesting. I think you could make the argument that he's one of the few actual good guys in this universe. But it was cool to see that he will get down and dirty, if the occasion calls for it. I'm really excited to see how his relationship with the Guild and the Explorer Society is going to evolve, especially since it doesn't seem like he really likes the Guild very much. We ended up with more questions than answers in that last story, and I hope we get some follow-up about that machine and about what else Jedzed asked about. And I really hope we find out what was going on with that mirror. I really hope Bernadette isn't like cursed now, because I really like her. But anyway, drop a comment below and let me know what master you want to see me do a video on next. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more, and thanks for watching.